All right, guys. So let's talk about mitosis, which is the last phase of the cell cycle. Remember that interphase is the longest phase of the cell cycle, and it takes 90% of the time. Okay, and that's where the cell grows. This DNA replicates, and then it grows some more before going into mitosis, which is actually only 10% of the cell cycle. Okay. And during mitosis is where the cell actually divides. In interphase, the cell grows, DNA replicates, then grows some more. It also goes through two checkpoints, which is G1 checkpoint, where the DNA is checked to see if it's ready to replicate and move on to the S phase. And then G2 checkpoint, where DNA actually, the DNA replication is checked again to make sure it was replicated correctly, it was done correctly. And if it is, it moves on to mitosis. If it wasn't, it gets sent back to interphase or to the S phase. Okay, if it moves on to mitosis, then the cell is actually going to go through 4 different stages and split. And at the end of mitosis, the cell is going to split into 2 identical cells. Okay, so that's the cell cycle. One cell goes in, 2 identical cells come out. Okay, and mitosis being the last part of the cell cycle. So again, mitosis is just a cell division. It's a type of cell division that results in 2 identical daughter cells. Okay, you can see it here on the diagram to the right. The cell goes into the cell cycle, DNA replicates, and then the cell goes into mitosis. And at the end of mitosis, we're going to end up with 2 identical cells. Okay, and this is how your cells divide. Okay, or our body cells. They go into the cell cycle, and at the end of the cell cycle, 2 identical cells come out. Okay, produces cells for growth and repair of the tissue. Again, when you hurt yourself, when you injure yourself, you cut your finger, you cut your skin. In order to repair that, cells have to reproduce, cells have to divide, and we do that, or our bodies do that through mitosis, which is the process of making identical cells, 2 from 1, right? It's a form of asexual reproduction. It doesn't require any sexual reproduction for the cells to actually make more of themselves, okay? But it only happens, it only divides somatic cells, okay, or body cells, your skin cells, your hair cells, okay? The other type of division that we'll talk about later on is meiosis, and meiosis happens in sex cells, okay, or gametes. Okay, sex cells are called gametes, and the only 2 sex cells that we'll talk about in this class is the egg for females and the sperm for males. Okay, but mitosis only divides somatic cells or body cells, your skin cells, your heart cells, your muscle cells, your bone cells, your hair cells, anything that has to do with your body, everything except your egg, the egg and the sperm, which are called sex cells. Okay, so that's mitosis. Now, mitosis, okay, has 4 stages: prophase, metaphase, anaphase, telophase, and we mentioned in the class you can use the acronym PMAT. Okay, so again, if this is the cell cycle, we know that interphase takes most of the time. Okay, but then the cell goes into mitosis, and mitosis is going to be divided into these 4 phases. Okay, prophase first, metaphase, anaphase, telophase, and cytokinesis, which we'll put together. Okay, so let's go through each phase and make sure you understand what happens in each. Okay, so in the before we do that, sorry about that, we have to look at the chromosome. We know that the chromosome is actually DNA that's being wrapped around itself really tight. Okay, now let's label this chromosome. The center of the chromosome, this area right here, that's called the centromere. Okay, so centromere. So the centromere of a chromosome is just the center, or the location where the 2, okay, chromatids, okay, connect to each other. Okay, each half of the chromosome, this half right here, and I'll use different colors. This half right here and this half right here are each called chromatids. Okay, and when those chromatids connect, that's called the centromere. Okay, when we're talking about your DNA, half of the chromatid or half of your chromosome comes from mom, half of the other DNA comes from dad. Okay, so again, the center of the chromosome is called a centromere, and each side of the chromosome is called a chromatid. Okay, and we'll need to know that when we get to prophase, or when we start looking at what happens in each phase. Okay, make sure you read the instructions here. Make sure you have your set of flip cards for mitosis. Follow the instructions. Okay, you should have four. On the top of the card, you're going to put a drawing. Then you're going to put a description. You're going to tape it in your notebook, and then you're going to write the name of that phase in the notebook, or on the notebook, okay, on the page in the notebook. So again, make sure you make your 4 flashcards, okay, and put them in your notebook. All right, so let's get started with prophase. So in prophase, what happens is the chromosomes actually coil up and become visible. Remember, chromosomes are DNA that has been wrapped around itself really, really tight. So in prophase, we actually get to see those chromosomes, okay? And the reason we get to see them is because of this right here. The nuclear envelope dissolves or disappears. You can see it here. The nucleus is dissolving, is disappearing. So we're able to see the chromosomes, or the X structures here, okay, that are in the nucleus, okay, because they're condensed and the nucleus already dissolved. Now after that, after the chromosomes are visible and the nucleus dissolves, then the cell moves into metaphase. And metaphase, okay, is where the chromosomes line up in the middle of the cell, or the equator of the cell. Meta, middle, right? So the chromosomes line up in the middle, and then these fibers right here, called the spindle fibers, actually attach to the centromere of the chromosome, right? Where the chromatids are actually attached to each other. So they attach to the centromere on each side, so they attach to each chromatid in the chromosome, okay? So again, in metaphase, the chromosomes line up in the middle of the equator and the spindle fibers attached to the centromeres, okay? After that happens, then the chromosome is going to move into anaphase. And in anaphase is when the centromeres actually separate, okay? And the sister chromatids separate, going to different sides of the cell. And you can see that in this picture right here. Okay, half of the chromosome is going to one side, half of the chromosome is going to the other, and that's because this chromatid and this chromatid actually separated. So this one is going that way, this one's going that way. Everything is divided, and everything is going to different sides of the cell. Okay, so the centromere divides, sister chromatids separate, and they move towards different poles or different sides of the cells. We call them poles. But everything is dividing, and you can see it here, okay? This is the cell, okay? This part of the chromosome is going that way. This other half is going this way, and those are chromatids, okay? All right, and then we move into the telophase cytokinesis part. This is where the nuclear envelope forms again, okay? And it forms around the chromosomes, and then after the nuclear envelope is formed, then the cell splits into 2 identical daughter cells, okay? So, and you can see that down here in this picture. You can see one cell here, the other one here, and it's actually splitting, right? It's about to separate. But, again, this is telophase and cytokinesis. It's the last part. This is when the nuclear envelope forms again. Remember, it dissolved in prophase, right? So it forms again around the chromosomes, and then the cell is going to split into 2. Okay. All right. Now, let me see. Okay. So now let's look at these pictures right here and try to identify each phase. Okay. You can pause the video and then you can push play again, and then we'll go over the names. All right. So hopefully you got them all right. Okay. They're actually in order. So prophase. Okay, we know that this is where the nucleus dissolves, and you can see here the nucleus is dissolving, the chromosomes are becoming visible, right? Over here is where the chromosomes line up in the middle, okay, metaphase, they line up in the middle, and the spindle fibers are actually attaching to those chromosomes, okay? And then this one is anaphase, when the chromatids separate and they go to opposite sides of the cell. This is telophase, where the cell is actually dividing. So you can see this little piece is missing still, but once it's there, then the cell splits and we have 2 identical cells. Okay, so that's mitosis, and that's what you need to know about each phase. Remember that it's a type of division that results in two identical daughter cells. Okay, so the cell spends 90% of its time during interphase, then it goes into mitosis where it actually splits into two after going through four stages: prophase, metaphase, anaphase, telophase, and cytokinesis. The M checkpoint that we saw in at the beginning, let me go back to that, that we saw here, okay, you can see the M checkpoint, it's right here, and where that is during the metaphase, where it's making sure that the chromosomes are lining up along the equator to make sure that everything's good. Okay, make sure you watch the video again. If you need another review, go through the PowerPoint, take your notes, and make sure you make your flashcards so you can have them as a resource for your mitosis phases. And if you have any questions, you can always go back and look at them.